My talk this afternoon is on health and safety issues related to ASM. And key things are that when it comes to health and safety, we are very, very much concerned about, what type of equipment we are using, the methods. Even if we understand the methods and this scale is important. Not only the scale, but the nature of the equipment and even other inputs, ingredients that we use to produce this. So I'll give you a small history about mining, and it's one of the oldest industries in the world. You know that mining, especially gold mining, history has it that it's been mined in this country maybe for well over like thousand years, and it's been with us since we ever thought about the Stone Age. So, well, we still believe that it's not sustainable because we know that it's finite, unless, of course, look, if it is even not finite, the built area cannot be mined unless we have a reason that we can move building site to where we have mined and then come and mine where the buildings are, and that's the only way you can close the loop. I think that if you know that there's no loop, like there's no cycle, that a loop is closed, there's no way we can talk about sustainability. Now, in history, we know that mining in general could be divided into like age of antiquity. That's the prehistoric period. You have the Middle Ages, and you have the modern time, the Renaissance, where you have civilization. And then from each stage, we have always had health and safety issues. They differ largely in what? In the time, based on time to start with, because in the Stone Age we used very limited equipment, instruments, which do not actually harm us. So they do not also have the capacity to transform the media that we use, which in itself would create other secondary health and safety threats. Now, mining, like I said, one of the oldest, I won't say it's the oldest, conditions like in gold mines, silver and lead, and lead mines of ancient Greece and Egypt revealed an almost complete disregard for miners' health and safety. So, and if you look at this, our time would have done same. So, miners were not just miners, and mining, although it was for economic reasons, it was used as punishment. So, mostly miners were prisoners and people who fell short of the law and were supposed to be punished. So there was no need to improve mining conditions. And so, well, we wanted money, and then we also had to deal with criminals. So it was convenient to use miners to succeed that. So there was no need to even modernize mining to reduce health risks, to reduce what? Safety, or to improve safety. Now, as growth in trade, ensued, and with expanding capital, what will happen? There was ever expansion of the industry, and so there was. You see, you could also look. Let me bring the word sustainability. If we start something very little, The only reason why you can say it's sustainable is that you are doing it, you are removing the material in such low quantities and rates that perhaps you think that the earth or the natural system can what? Absorb this and reproduce. So if we have a system that produces at the rate of say 5 centimeters per second, and you remove it like say 6 centimeters, you never sustain, because extraction will what? Exceed, replication. But if replication like extraction was 4 centimeters per second, then you can argue that what? You can sustain. That's the only context that we can say we can just be justified to use the word sustainability. And when we go further, I will explain why at this age in our time we can no longer talk about sustainability. Maybe you have to drop it as very wide, like people who are those of you who are Christian, people who like you have sinned, and then what will you do? If you have sinned, you will ask for forgiveness and then sin no more. So we will stop using the word, knowing that we have been deceiving ourselves or deceiving people. Because, and in fact, it's not us, it's economists. Those of you who are, do we have anything like economic geology? Yes. Are you serious? Yes. Okay, so, so you see, our problem in this world is what? Is the economy. So economies are our problems. Even as we stand in politics, where have you? There, well, we scientists, we are intelligent, and yet we are harmless. But economics are the most harmful people in society. I'll explain. So mines were made deeper, and you see, the depth of mines also would bring different implications. That first, the physical hazard, collapse, something like collapse of the mines. So you have shear accidents. And all this, I'm actually throwing out in this array the different types of risks and safety concerns in mines. And then eventually we'll harmonize them, group them, and that will be my concluding slide. Now, mining changed from a backyard enterprise to a skilled occupation. And I'll tell you where some of us fit. I'm not a historian, but by vocation I have elected to be historian because history always has an important place in any subject. If you look, I had a department of biological, environmental, and occupational health. It's a new area in our part of the world because we haven't been thinking about workers' health. But look, I can tell you that this is a huge area that we need to look at. And I'm presenting this in the context of how occupational health has evolved. So let's look at the next slide. So in the Middle Ages, apart from improvement in ventilation, miners remained without any significant means of protection. So you had Lee Dixon Agricola. He lived within 1494 to like 1555. And he was a town physician. He started to find out that certain illnesses were associated with certain group of workers. And in fact, we time that even people were dying, women were married 7 times. Not because they chose to do so, they will marry and husbands will go. They will marry, and it's 7 good times. The Bible says that 1 day 7 women shall cling unto 1 man. But this is the 7th time, 7 different. No, you haven't heard it. Huh? You haven't heard it. Well, if you haven't heard it, I'm diseases. So, like mortality, people who were very concerned, they started to investigate, trying to find out who was dying from what and what. So this was how occupational health evolved as a discipline, and we are standing here to be talking about it. Yeah. So Agricola in his book said, the mines of Capitian Mountain, Agricola said, women were found who had married 7 husbands, all of whom this terrible consumption has carried off to a premature death. Another leader in this area made his observation on mines and smaller smelter workers on his experience as a town physician in village in Austria. He said in his book on health, were regarded as established knowledge on subject of 200 years. So I'm just giving you a little history of how this is. Let me be quick. So dawn of civilization came when miners began to question. They began to protest for better conditions. These days we still protest, don't we? We go on civil strife to demand for better condition. Or I still have to stay within the sorry. So if you look at in any organization, that's why you have what? Workers' unions, isn't it? You have all the civil groups. So it began like workers in mines protesting over their health concerns. And other leaders in like human rights. So humanist approach came. And because the workers were typically prisoners and criminals, other people felt that, but of course, they were human beings in the first place, isn't it? Even if you're a criminal, the most important, the first thing is that you are a human being before a criminal, isn't it? So they began to demand explanation of where the rights of a human being, the right to live as a human being was. And so this evolved into like all the strong unionist group that we have today. Now, and you know some of these things, William Wilberforce, even slave trade, it happened around all these times, and in the 18th century. So this is where civilization actually began, the modern life today. And so there became a need for what? Mines development. Professor Mankwa, so you were talking about mines development. So people now said, if we knew that you were going to operate a mine, first of all, it must be safe for human, you must look at human safety. It must be safe in the first place, which is how you now have EPA. The modern times of this era is EPAs. They will conduct environmental impact assessment, not only environmental impact. It also includes, these days, people talk about environmental and social impact assessment, isn't it? So it's much, much broader. And it goes on and it goes on. So, having said this, so you now have, if you look at it, it looks very nice to live in, isn't it? So medical influence, it also came as a result of medical influence, knowing improvement in medicine, suggesting that if you release mercury here, or you are in the underground blasting, you are going to get mercury vapor, silica dust, and all this would affect your lungs. You're breathing in, and you are also perspiring. Some can enter through your pores. Okay, and then all the diseases that may be associated with it, we'll list a few of them. For example, one other thing we have to know is that, and that is why I strongly believe that we can't talk about sustainability. We do know that if anything changes in the environment, it will affect another thing. And we have to first come from the background that we have very limited knowledge. Prof. Nyame, you said that because some of the impacts that we do, of the activities that we conduct, the mines activities, we have never imagined them. We don't even have capacity to tell before now. Some of these will be done, will come later after closure of mines. And because we have limited knowledge and we have short memory, you will not even trace, you will have a disease and it will be linked to the mines, and because the mines is closed, you will never even think that, you will not link that disease to the mines. So first of all, we have limited interest. So you see how the modern times of modern mines. So health, I think I have to spend 1 minute on here. So health and safety issue, this is why I'm here. And they depend on what? Mine type, whether it is galamsey, small scale, artisanal, because this can determine the type of health issues. If you are using heavy equipment, accident can create what? Death. So these are the physical and more direct health challenges. You could also even just be crushed by a tool. So it depends on the tools that, equipment that you are using, whether they are sharps. You can get cuts, you can get injuries, whether it's small scale or artisanal versus like modernized or mechanized and commercial one. So you know that talks about the scales of what? Health and safety issues. It depends on methods too. If you are using highly sophisticated extractive equipment, you go to the bottom, the real bottom. It means that the challenges you have would be you introduce new extraneous materials into the system. For example, our water bodies, even the air, and then you are exposed. So the exposure, the main exposure routes are what? Ingestion and what? Inhalation. And in fact, the gaseous pollutants are the most dangerous because they penetrate your system and they are very rapid in going through a circulatory system. So like if you have lung diseases, lung cancer, you can get lung cancer from these dust, for example. You could also get silicosis. Silicosis, lung cancer, you really can't tell unless like you use very sharp and highly discriminatory diagnostics.